Hello everyone, I am Abdulmalik Rufai, a researcher at the Department of Political Science of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. And today, I'll be presenting a paper entitled Multilevel Governance, Policy Making, and Climate Change Responses, an appraisal of drivers and challenges amongst Nigeria's subnational governments. My presentation today will be guided by the following outline, right from the introduction to the objectives, to the multi-level representation of actors, to the justification for selection of respondents, to NPG theory as a framework of pluralism, to the findings, theoretical implications, and conclusion. As the 21st century keeps exhibiting high level of improvement and growth, so are the challenges that keeps manifesting in many realities of these polities. One of those challenges is climate change, which is seen to be ravaging the sustainability of many nations today. It is thus in view of the enormity of this threat that multi-level governance is seen to simply entail the process of trickling down power and authority across three spheres. Right, first from the central to the local government, second to the state and civil society, and lastly, joining of international coordination mechanisms. Climate change is already recognized as a menace at the apex of the multidimensional challenges in many nations of the world today. For instance, about 800 million people in the world are vulnerable to the threats of climate change in many manifestations such as drought, floods, heat waves, extreme weather events, and sea level rise. Recent discussions on climate change have now moved beyond controversies on whether this phenomenon exists to how its threats can be mitigated and adapted to. Most developed countries of the world tend to pay much attention on the mitigative actions, while many developing parts like Africa are notable for their focus on adaptation measures. Nigeria, for instance, like many other developing communities, is not left out of the impact of climate change, as many manifestations, including flooding, are noticeable in these climes. For instance, it was recently revealed on the Flood List website that over 20,000 Nigerians in 2020 have been displaced by the recent flooding in parts of Adamawa, Lagos, Oyo, Benue, and many other states in Nigeria. However, with respect to the implementation of climate policies, the multi-level governance mechanics in the global south is still riddled with many challenges, especially at the subnational and local levels. It is thus against this backdrop that research and observations in Nigeria have thus showed that for the menace of the negative climate to be curbed, there is a need for effective state-society relations in overcoming the challenges of the phenomenon. This study assessed the processes and outcomes involved in how subnational governments adopt adaptation policies to their specific context. Specifically, this study examined the factors that drive the formulation of subnational climate response policies in southwest Nigeria and how they also actuate in practice. Secondly, the study assessed the roles of state and non-state actors on how they implicate outcomes with respect to the formulation of these responses. And lastly, the study examined the factors that limit the progress in driving these policies and how they can be addressed too. Here is a multi-level representation of actors. As shown in this diagrammatic representation, it is seen that the multi-level governance interplay starts right from the global or the supranational level. It then trickles down to the national, to the subnational level, and also to the local level. The complementary role of the international NGOs is observed at between the global and the national level, while that of the national NGOs and private sectors is mostly observable between the national and the subnational level. Then due to the focus of this research, which focuses more on the area between the subnational and the local level, and also the complementary role of the civil society actors, notably the environmental NGOs and community-based organizations. Methodology. The study adopted a qualitative approach, such that interviews were conducted with key state and non-state actors in Lagos and Oyo. The interviews were also augmented with relevant policy papers, records, document reviews, and direct observation. A semi-structured interview guide was utilized, while the interviews were also facilitated through face-to-face and telephone modes. Justification for selection of respondents. In Nigeria, the 36 subnational governments and 774 local governments have local responsibilities for climate change, which includes public education and engagement. Lagos and Oyo are two environmentally challenged states in the southwestern zone of Nigeria. Lagos, unlike Oyo, is a member of the C40, which is a network of the world's megacities committed to addressing climate change. The choice of respondents, which cuts across the state and non-state actors, was selected in that form to enable a multi-level stakeholder selection such that balanced viewpoints are expressed across borders. This study finds its theoretical underpinning on the new public governance theory espoused by Stephen Osborne. The basic assumptions upon which the NPG theory is built is on the existence of a pluralist state in which proper knowledge and understanding of what goes on into formulation and implementation of policy is established between the state and non-state actors. A plural state is simply a setting where relations occur amongst many states and non-state actors in delivering the necessary services to the general public. This NPG theory best explains the relations between the government and the governed, most especially the civil society stakeholders within the realm of governance. Now to the crux of this research. With relations to the first objective, which focused on the factors that drive the formulations of subnational climate response policies in southwest Nigeria, the study found that a key factor is the influence of policy transfer from the global sphere down to the subnational levels for domestication. This was demonstrated in the pictorial representation as shown in the previous slide, whereby the multi-level governance interplay trickles down from the global sphere down to the national level, to the subnational level, and to the local level for domestication. Secondly, the role of NGOs as actors of civil society in upholding their core values to the society as consumers and users of climate information. Political willingness is another factor that drives the formulation of subnational climate responses in southwest Nigeria. An instance is the then Governor Fashola of Lagos, whom is a 21st century cosmopolitan leader who eased the incorporation process of climate activities in Lagos State. Also, the Fashola's administration, specifically between 2009 to 2015, also paved way for the Lagos State Climate Change Adaptation Strategy, LASCCAS, which was an offshoot of the Lagos State Climate Change Summit. Incessant flooding experience in the southwestern zone of Nigeria, especially the 2012 historic flood, is also a notable factor that has driven the formulation of subnational climate response policies in southwest Nigeria. In Oyo, the socio-demographic makeup, the town planning and the literacy level of the citizens in this community is seen as a major challenge, thereby requiring adequate climate response actions. With regards to the second objective, which focused on the roles of state and non-state actors in implicating these outcomes, we found out that with respect to state actors in Nigeria, climate education and engagement are usually carried out on radio, the television, and social media networks such as the Twitter, the WhatsApp, and the Facebook. From observations and findings of this research, we established that at the federal level, actors mostly concern themselves with the legislation and policy enactment process. Introduction of climate change clubs in schools, regional sensitizations of workshops in many southwestern zone of Nigeria, and summits are observed as activities fostered by state actors in many parts of Nigeria. At the subnational level, activities of the actors include waste management, planting of trees, introduction of solar energies to communities, and sending of early warning flood systems to flood-prone areas in southwest Nigeria. The non-state actors, notably the environmental NGOs, engage the public in activities such as cleanups, sensitization, and green summer school on the basic science of climate change. In relations to the third objective, which focused on the factors limiting the progress in driving these policies, the study found out that climate change is still being treated only as an environmental issue, such that the other sectors in the polity exist in silos and do not even prioritize climate-related activities. For instance, it was observed that in Nigeria, the take the Ministry of Education, for instance, they do not have a direct policy to talk on public education on climate issues in the country. Another factor limiting the progress in these policies is the slowness in assenting to climate change bills in the national parliament, and also the low budget provisions for the environment. At the subnational level in Lagos, the LASCCAS still awaits the approval in the State Executive Council. Similarly, in Oyo State, the Oyo State Climate Change Action Plan has only undergone its first briefing in the State Executive Council. The limited capacity of actors and also climate literacy, especially among the local government agencies, are seen as limiting factors to the effectiveness of climate change responses in both states. A low multi-stakeholder engagement and collaboration, most especially between the state and non-state most especially between the state and non-state actors, still exists as a limiting factor in both states. This was established in many interviews with NGOs, where it was revealed that the state and the NGOs only come together to talk on or relate on climate issues. And then when it comes to the collaboration and actuating plans they are formulated, it is there seems to be a disconnect in that aspect, such that the state actors do not follow up with the NGOs, and the NGOs even perceive the state actors as driving them away from implementing these policies. Theoretical implications. In line with the assumption of the existence of the pluralist state, in which the government must ensure engagement and creating of frameworks for a collaboration with the civil society, the findings of this study depart from this assumption. The first a core tenant assumption for the NPJ theory is ensuring engagement and creating of frameworks for collaboration. The study found out that most state and non-state actors only have positive or cordial relations, and when it comes to collaborating on activities to see to the mitigating or adapting to the climate challenges, there seems to be a delinked process between the state and non-state actors. Now, secondly, in tandem with the assumption of checks and balances, the study confirms that the environmental NGOs often exist as watchdogs on the state actors. Conclusion. The study concluded that there exists very low state civil society engagement, especially at the subnational level. Also, that the local government agencies needs to be strengthened and given more autonomy, especially on climate matters, as they are ordinarily saddled with domesticating and implicating this challenge, the climate actions at their levels. Poor and inadequate funding of climate action still exists as a constraint. Change of power often fetters the sustainability and continuity of climate actions and strategies. The study also concluded that limited political will and environmental commitment is a challenge to driving public education and engagement on climate change. Lastly, efforts should be more on impact-focused projects rather than cosmetic projects with little impact. Here is where I draw a curtain to my presentation. Thank you for listening.